Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. This is a third in a series, a six-part series talking about the quality review rubric that SUNY has put out. We are in the third section of this and really just looking at content, making sure that it's designed well and so that you can reach as many students as possible, and that way learning will take place. So let me get started. I'm going to make the assumption that you have an online course or you are preparing an online course. And therefore, you are responsible overall for the design of your course. You may have other people helping you, but in the end, you're responsible. You're the one that's going to be teaching this. One thing that we do know is students sometimes struggle a lot because of how the course is put together, how it's created, how it's arranged. And really what you want to do is you want to make the technology transparent to the content, that you want the students to be able to really just focus on the content. So we're going to learn about how to make this transparent so they can do exactly that. So let me share some tips on how you can build a well-designed course. So one of the first standards that we're looking at is that you want to create a course that is consistent throughout. So that way, if they go from module to module, they're not trying to figure it out again. Ideally, if you have multiple courses, that courses are laid out the same way, that it's consistent, that it's easy to navigate. So one of the things that we do at Jamestown Community College is we use a rubric or a template for our courses. That in this case, all the modules are set up the same way, that they have 5 folders in there, dealing with the objectives, the course materials, the assignments, the discussions, and the assessments. And students know exactly where to go in each part of the course, from week to week, module to module. They know where to go find their content. And so this helps with navigation, that students are clear about where things are and when they should access them. If you have a very complicated course layout, this will lead to confusion, that it's a poor learning experience. And when students have these poor learning experiences, they get frustrated and they will leave your class. They will stop attending. They will drop your class. And what's the sense when we can control all that and have them stay in the course? So I encourage you, if your institution has a template, like JCC has a template, I encourage you to actually use the template to design your course. And that way, across the institution, everything's the same, and the students can focus on the content rather than focus on the technology. The next standard, when you are laying out your information, you need to let it breathe. You can't have a really compact, multi-page block of text. It's hard to read. Students get frustrated with this. So you need to add headers and lists and white space in order for it to breathe, especially working in an online environment. When you're working with a textbook, a book, that's something different. But if you're doing something that's online, you need to break it up a little bit. Ideally, you want to just break your content into chunks and have links to these different chunks that they can go in and focus on that material. It's better for the working memory, and it will help them recall that information a lot better than a multi-page document that you want them to sift through. Break it up. Give them something, work in smaller chunks. If you're creating videos, in this particular case, I'm creating a video that will probably go for about 45 minutes. if I was designing this for a class, I would actually break this down and just focus on maybe each of these standards on their own, as opposed to doing this. But I'm doing this in a workshop mode. So I failed to record it the first time I did it. So now I'm re-recording it. And basically, with this, I'm focusing, I'm doing a whole presentation. But if I was going to do this for my class, I would definitely break it up into smaller chunks. So here is an example of what I was talking about. That on the left side, I have this big block of text. And, you could start reading through it, famous sayings, a stitch in time saves 9, all good things come to those who wait. But if you look over to the right-hand side, how much easier is that to read? That it's broken up into, different sections. There's using bullet points, there's white space. It's a lot easier to go through the content, and the content is the same, except for maybe, that the industry and patients and stuff. But basically, these quotes or these sayings are the same. So use white space to your advantage. Don't be bashful with that. Break things up. Based on your content, if you have a lot of content that you're going to share in your course, use a more to explore, right? Students don't have to get everything right away. Let them, if you got somebody that's really interested in a topic, have an area where they can do a deep dive to learn more about a particular topic and use this more to explore. This will help out quite a bit, and allows you to, just keep adding content to your course and switching things out. Maybe you don't want to get rid of it, but you put it into this more to explore, and opportunity to refresh and keep building upon your course. Contrast is huge. That you can see this image on, off to the side, using different shades of blue, but sometimes it's hard to distinguish between certain shades. And so this happens in your course as well. You want to make sure that there's enough contrast with the content you're providing, so it's easily comprehended, easily taken in, by the students. So here's an example. These these different sections of text, these 3 different sections, say exactly the same thing, but you can tell that the contrast with the bottom 2 is terrible. That it's really hard to see the difference with that contrast. And so having really distinct contrast, either white on black or black on white, will help students be able to see that information. Here is another example. The contrast is certainly better, but you can see that it's starting to degrade when I use these different colors. A lot better than when I'm using gray or the yellow, but it's something to just keep an eye on, right? That a dark color on a light background works best. And also, I would encourage you to use these different accessibility checkers to look to see how your course is working in terms of color. That somebody who was colorblind would not be able to look at that image and see that there is a word color. They could not see it, and therefore they missed out on that part of the lesson. And so you want to make sure that it is going to be very clear. So when you are preparing instructions for your course, it could be for an assignment, it could be a discussion, you need to be as thorough as possible and provide links to further instructions as needed, especially in a written course, because in a face-to-face course, if students are confused, they just raise their hand and you'll explain it. But in an online course, there is a gap between the time that they ask the question and the time that you will respond back to them. And that is slowing them down in providing a proper response. So one strategy that I use when I provide instructions is I create these in Google Docs. And when I share it, instead of sharing with view only, I share with comment only, or with comments. And so that way, if a student has, needs further explanation, I have encouraged them to go in and make a comment on the document. And so then I'll go in and improve the document based on their comments. So this is kind of interactive. And I do this for my syllabus. I do this for the discussion, for a lot of different things. So when you're providing instructions, not only do you need to tell them what to do, but also why they need to do it. Why are you doing this particular activity? Why do they have to do this particular discussion? Excuse me, allergies. But you also want to tie it into how it relates to the course or the module or the objectives. Make those really tight, because very often we'll mention the objectives at the beginning of the course and then we'll never see them again. But you have an opportunity to tie it back to the objectives and say, this is why we are doing certain things at a certain period of time. And this is just re-emphasizing the fact that, tie these things back to the learning objectives. Make sure that you use language that reflects those objectives. This helps with explaining why. Why are we doing this particular assignment? And tying those things back. And you can link, provide links back to further explanation. I have detailed instructions regarding certain assignments. I link to the rubrics. I link to that additional information, or linking to an example where I model how I want things done. And this just helps provide more detail for your instructions. It adds, clarity. So, that way they can do what you want them to do. This is kind of a no-brainer. Making sure that your course is grammatically free of, or that it's free of grammatical errors and spelling errors. Going in and just proof that. Run it through a word processor first. Do a grammar spelling check. I'd encourage you to do that before you go ahead and add it to your course. Because anything that they see in the course, where you have grammatical errors. I was just looking at a course earlier today, and the city for the community college was misspelled. And, when somebody sees this, they already start asking questions that they're kind of suspect, based on what they're seeing. So, and it's hard to criticize students about their spelling and grammar when your content has spelling and grammar errors in it also. Like I said, use a word processor and then copy your content into your course. I use a tool called Grammarly that will go ahead and highlight all kinds of different issues in my documents. This has been a huge change for my writing, that I've used this particular tool. So I'm very happy with it. I can use it in my word processor like Word, but it's also available for Google Docs. And I can use it also in my learning management system. I use it in Blackboard. So it's available in all three, and it readily identifies things that I need to fix. So typically, it'll highlight something, tell me if I'm ending things with a preposition, or, things that I need to fix. So Grammarly, a tool that I like. Part of formatting your document, adding that white space, is to make sure that you're using titles and headings and bullets. Make sure that you do those properly. Don't just go into your document and highlight a line of text and increase the font size and turn it bold and call that a heading. That is not a heading. That is text that has been changed with bold and size, but it's not necessarily a heading. So use the tools as part of your word processor to make sure that you get it right. And the reason that this is important is for visual learners or somebody who has full capacity of their vision. This helps to grab attention. But for somebody who's visually impaired, if you use the headers correctly, it will help the screen reader identify different sections of your text. And so that's why you want to use these particular tools and use them correctly. So in your or in your learning management system, you have the ability to take a line of text and change the heading to it. And I've highlighted this with a box on the screen, pointing out where the headers are. And I'll go through the rest of the document and make sure that the headings are appropriate at different parts of the document. And this will help the screen reader reading the screen, but also allows other students to go through and visually identify where different sections are in the course. And basically, you're just kind of following an outline approach, that you have a hierarchy for different parts of the course, and others can identify what's important and what's lesser important, I guess. Okay, flashing, blinking text, just don't. It was very early 1980s, when the web came about. This was in vogue, but it was annoying then and it's annoying now. In addition, it can cause medical issues with some of your viewers. That this flashing or blinking text, it can cause seizures, causes people to have headaches. And this is also, in relation to, not only images, but the text. Just don't do it. Don't do it, okay? If you want to highlight text, bring the attention to it, change the headings, change the fonts, change the styles, use bold or italics. Don't use underlines. Underlines indicate that something could be a link. And so then you're going to get questions, hey, is this link broken? So don't use underline, but use bold, use italics. That'll help. That'll help your content. So to bring attention to it. You can use color, but sparingly, and don't use color as a primary way of bringing attention to something. Okay, so if you want, as you're creating your document, if you want to bring attention to something, you can use a little symbol in there, like a stop sign or a question mark or exclamation mark or something, next to the text. Emojis are very useful for this, that you can use it to bring attention to something. So, weave those into your text. When you are developing your content, do not use anything less than 12 points. Right? When you are using your word processor, keep it at least 12 points or higher. If you are preparing a PowerPoint presentation, you should not use anything less than 24 points. And so, otherwise you're making it more difficult for the folks that are reading your content. You should make sure, test this stuff on all your different devices, making sure that it's accessible on all your devices. Check it out on a phone, check it out on your iPads if you have those, on your computers. Make sure that it is readable and that it reformats. Ideally, you want to make it mobile friendly so that when it goes to a different format, that it'll adjust automatically. And so you try to do that. I've seen countless PDF documents where the material is not readable. When you scan something to a PDF document, you need to make sure that it's OCR, optical character reading, that it's, basically has converted the information into text so that screen reading devices can read it. But I've seen some just very poor PDF documents that you don't have to be visually impaired not to read it. Heck, I can't read it. So why go through the effort of creating this when you've created something that's substandard? Let's just do it right the first time. So create that content. And for your learning management system, if you're creating text, it will typically default to 12 points. And so create your content with that. Use the default fonts in your learning management system because they've probably been set up to do it correctly. When you are creating content, ideally display this in a linear format instead of a table. And what do I mean by that? So on this particular image on the right-hand side, this is set up in a linear format. So I'm going down the page, required elements, content, then I have 3 bullets, then I got another header, length, and then that. Where below that, this is set up as a table. With a screen reader, you're creating more problems for the reader when you set it up as a table and not properly creating the table. So the next couple slides are just going to focus on this topic of using a table, but don't use it to lay out your content. Okay, that's not the right way to do it. Just use a linear format. For somebody who's visually, it may make it look nicer. That's great, but it's going to cause you rework later if you have somebody who is visually impaired and you need to fix your documents. So I just encourage you just to avoid it for display purposes and just lay it out. It may create longer pages, that's fine, but at least people will be able to consume the information correctly. As I said, one of the biggest problems is with laying out tables for layout. It's really with the screen readers that it's holding back individuals who have a visual disability. And so, we can just avoid that. If you are going to use a table and you want to set up a table properly, one of the things that you need to do is to make sure that it has a header row. And a header, these are useful, once again, for screen readers that when it processes this, changes it to speech, that it will identify what the headers are. And the headers can be at the top, but also on the left-hand side. If you have a table, the other thing that you want to make sure that you do is have a description of that particular table. What is the, having a title for it, having a description, and then a properly laid out table. And we're going to just focus on that just a little longer, that you have a title and a summary, and then lay out your particular table. And once again, it's useful for everyone. So, having a description of the table can add clarity to somebody who, even can see the table that don't have a disability, but it's very useful for somebody with a screen reader. And the order is the title, the description, then the table. And if you want to know how well you did, listen to it in a screen reader. And you'll get a sense of why you have to do this. So if you've never gone through this exercise of listening to your content in a screen reader, I encourage you to look at something that you look at it and say, you know, I wonder what that really sounds like, and do that. And I think it will be eye-opening for you in understanding why you want to do that, and make it more useful for your students. As I mentioned, also for tables, that you have headers and columns, that they're properly assigned, that they need, and these are formatted in a very special way. So you have to go to your particular word processor and make sure that they are correctly created when you do that. Making sure that your headers and columns, they're short, simple, don't make them too complicated, right? It's just to help identify information. Now we're getting into the last, kind of like the last major section, and it's dealing with slideshows. One, you should use a template when you're building a slide deck. I've used the template for this particular presentation. And, you know, if you were to watch this again, you'll probably notice where I come to a major change. I have a slide that looks like this. And then for more detailed, I have a different looking slide. But they are consistent throughout my slide presentation. And each slide should have a title. Once again, this is for the visually impaired that have to use a screen reader. So that's why you would want to do that. Consistency, consistency, consistency. The more that your course is consistent, the less cognitive load that you're putting on students. And so that's why you want to do that. Do not use your slide presentation. Don't use the notes feature, not the notes, but like for the handouts where you have 3 slides and they got little lines where you have students write on this. Don't do that. A slide presentation is to support a presentation. If you want to have a handout that students can use, create a properly designed handout. Okay? Don't try to use a tool that's not designed for the task. Don't try to use that. So presentation software like Google Slides or PowerPoint aren't designed for handouts. Create a properly designed handout. You can make it tighter, you can make it more usable, and it's just the right thing to do. Try to simplify your slides as much as possible. So if you have to give a presentation, rather than put all that text on the screen, which does not help learning one iota, put it in the notes section so you can refer to it later or as you need to. But keep your slides as simple as possible. Otherwise, you're going to degrade learning. I have an entire different presentation talking about building slide decks, but one of the things that I kind of learned is just keep it as simple as possible. A little bit of text, an image, that's what you want to do. And there's lots of different reasons, and it's based on how the brain processes information. Having slides with lots of bullet points is not helping learning. And then for the slides themselves, they should be as simple transition as possible. Don't use automatic transitions. Don't, when you add a video to your course, add a slide deck to your course, don't make it where it automatically moves through the slides. Let the user control moving through the slides. And this once again comes to the research that students who had slides with no transitions, they scored higher on examinations. All right, so let's use the research that's out there, to build better instruction. Same goes with any animations, audio, anything that's moving, even imagery. If it does not add to the learning directly, it is a distraction. It reduces learning if it's not appropriate. So you may want to spruce up your slides where I say, you should have an image on your slide. Well, the image has to be related to the content on the slide. Just to have an image of a pretty dog and your slide has nothing to do with dogs, you are not helping learning. In fact, you are degrading it. So get rid of the dog. Have an image that is related specifically to what you're talking about. All right. So when you're building out your courses, things to think about. Make sure that your content is uncluttered, you have a clean layout, it's easy to navigate, that you've broken up your large blocks of text, you have a lot of white space, that you're helping to control where you want folks to focus on in your course. So break things up, chunk that information. Make sure they have a good contrast, right? Dark on white, ideal. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. Don't make it hard for them to read your content. Make sure your instructions are crystal clear, that you have, as much information as possible for them to do this. Create a mechanism where they can tell you where you can improve upon this. And just keep improving your instructions so you don't have questions about what to do. Naturally, make sure everything's spelled correctly and it's free of grammatical errors. Just makes you look better. And this goes back to, this idea of white space, but use your headers, use your tools correctly. There's headers in there, there's bullets in there. Don't just put a 1 period, write things out, and 2 period, write things out. Those are not bullets. Make sure that you use your software correctly because the screen readers rely on that. Flashing and blinking text, just don't. Do not do it. Use your default fonts on your learning management system. 12 point you should be using. If you're building a slide deck, you shouldn't do anything less than 24. Lay things out linearly as opposed to using a table to control the display. Okay. Make sure tables have a title and a summary. Make sure that there's rows and column headers that are appropriate. When you are using, doing a slide deck, make sure that you use a consistent layout, that you also have titles for each one. And make sure that you are not using automatic transitions between your slides. And that has it for how displaying your content. So last thing I'll leave you is if you have questions, put them in the content or the comments. I'll be happy to address those. So with that, I want to thank you